Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is David Medina, and I'm co-founder and COO of Results for America. And we are joined by great partners of today's event from the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Bloomberg Philanthropies. And today we will be hearing from recent recipients of Swiffer grants, solid waste infrastructure for recycling grant funds, which were authorized under the bipartisan infrastructure law. And our featured speakers today will share key details of this grant program and how to create winning applications for it. They'll also share best practices for towns and cities that are in the process of planning their own local recycling infrastructure projects. So as always, we want this to be an interactive session, so please include any questions you may have or comments in the chat, and we'll get to as many of them in our Q&A session as possible. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dan Halpert, who is the Recycling Market Development Lead at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Thanks for joining us today, Dan. The Zoom is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, David. And welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today to share information about our grant program founded under the bipartisan infrastructure law. As David said, my name is Dan Halpert. I'm the program manager for these grants for the Swiffer and the Rio grants here at EPA's headquarters, speaking to you today from Washington, D.C. Before we begin today, I just want to reiterate, I understand that the title of this session is to understand best practices and maybe gain some insight into competitive advantages for future rounds of funding for this grant program. However, that will not be my role here today. As the granting organization, as a representative of EPA today, I'll be providing broad information about our grant program, not any specific lessons learned, in an effort to sort of maintain that level of competitive balance across our different rounds of funding. However, there are other speakers later in the presentation today that can share their specific experience. Next slide, please. So the last few years at EPA, in terms of renewed congressional focus and excitement around sustainable materials management, has really been historic. And I think this slide, it will help set the baseline for really where these grants came from and a lot of the rationale behind them. It all sort of started in December of 2020. Congress passed the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act, which gave EPA new permanent authority for grants. It also directed EPA to develop several reports that focused on reducing plastic wastes, to create a strategy on post-consumer materials management, and also to produce a national recycling strategy using our annual appropriations from that year. In response to these pieces of legislation, EPA released that national recycling strategy. It was called the National Recycling Strategy, Part 1 of a series on building a circular economy for all. This strategy was released in 2021, and since then, we've actually released two additional strategies. The Draft National Strategy to Prevent Plastic Pollution, which was released in April of 2023, and the Draft National Strategy for Reducing Food Loss and Waste and Recycling Organics, which was actually just recently released in December 2023. Moving back, though, to 2021, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is also often referred to as the bipartisan infrastructure law, provided EPA with unprecedented funding to support solid waste management and recycling initiatives nationwide, which are helping us build a circular economy for all. So this bipartisan infrastructure law funding was structured in three different funds, the first being $275 million in funding for what's called SWIFR, the Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling Grant Program. Another $75 million to fund the Recycling Education and Outreach Grant Program, and $25 million to support battery recycling initiatives. And I'll talk about these in more detail in future slides. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the bill provides the bipartisan infrastructure law, or the bill as you'll hear it called in shorthand, provides EPA with funding for building a circular economy through those three main funds that I just mentioned. The $275 million for the Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling Grant Program. That's $55 million per year for 5 years. In addition, $15 million per year for 5 years, for totaling $75 million for the Recycling Education and Outreach Grant Program, and that $25 million in grant funding to support battery recycling initiatives, broken up into $10 million for best practices for collection for batteries and $15 million for labeling guidelines. The grants, and as well as this battery money, supports the objectives and the implementation of EPA's national recycling strategy, which helps us build an economy that is devoted towards keeping materials, products, and services in circulation for as long as possible. The focus of the Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling, or the SWIFR program, will help communities fund recycling, composting, reuse, and other solid waste infrastructure. And I like to think of it sort of whereas SWIFR is hardware, recycling, education, and outreach, or RIO is software. So SWIFR is hard things that you can actually, equipment, construction, other infrastructure related purchases. Whereas recycling, education, and outreach is really the soft behavior changes that need to be made at the local level to improve communities and help them understand how to recycle better. Furthermore, our batteries work will focus on developing the best practices for the collection of batteries, as well as voluntary labeling guidelines and communication materials. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of our 4 new grant programs. After gathering input from the public over the course of several months, about a year and a half ago, to inform our program design, the agency divided up the SWIFR grant program into 3 separate funding opportunities. One for communities or local governments, one for states and territories, and one for tribes and intertribal consortia. The recycling, education, and outreach grants are separate from the SWIFR grants, and that's covered by one funding opportunity for all eligible applicants. And in September 2023, EPA announced the 25 selections of over $73 million under the SWIFR grants for communities, designated by the arrow on this slide, as well as over $30 million for all 56 states and territories around the United States. More recently, in November 2023, we announced the 25 organizations across the country that were selected to receive $33 million under the recycling, education, and outreach grants, as well as the 59 tribes and intertribal consortia that received nearly $60 million in awards under the first round of funding. Now, since this forum today is composed of mayors and those with an interest primarily in local government, we'll focus mostly on SWIFR grants for communities. However, I'm happy to field questions about our other funding opportunities. Next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, the first rounds of awards awarded over $100 million to support recycling infrastructure all across the country, at all levels of government, really, in states, territories, the District of Columbia, all 56 states and territories, 59 tribes and intertribal consortia, and 25 communities ranging from big cities to small rural communities around the country. Individual awards for this grant program were between $500,000 and $4 million. And in order to be eligible for the SWIFR grants for communities, applicants had to prove their status as a political subdivision of a state or territory. And that's really just a way of saying that you are a unit of local government, a subdivision of that larger state or territory. Grant recipients that were awarded, that were selected for funding, invested in a broad range of project types. Everything from purchasing a new fleet of recycling collection vehicles that would improve curbside access, to constructing drop-off stations in rural areas that may not have the ability to conduct curbside collection, and also towards constructing or establishing composting facilities and increasing capacity at existing facilities. This was a big focus that we saw. A lot of communities around the country were interested in improving their composting facility, and I think you'll see that represented in some of the selections that we'll highlight later. I also want to highlight that 76% of funding for these communities are benefiting what we're defining as disadvantaged communities. These are communities that are overburdened or under-resourced in their ability to provide waste management and recycling services in the community. And we're very pleased to say that this is in line with the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative. Next slide, please. Swiffer grants, like I mentioned a few slides ago, this is really a historic time for federal investment in waste management and recycling. These Swiffer grants are the largest investment in recycling infrastructure by EPA and by Congress over the last 30 years. These are the most significant investments that are supporting the National Recycling Strategy and our other plastic strategy and food loss and waste strategy in our series of building a circular economy with the goal of keeping materials, products, and services in circulation as long as possible. But beyond the funding too, the outputs and the outcomes are also historic. We're seeing that these objectives for these grant programs will reduce the impact that materials have on climate by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and keeping these materials out of landfills. They'll also create jobs in both rural and urban communities, including union jobs and jobs that don't require four-year degrees. All the while, these grants will support improving local waste management systems and strengthening supply chain. That's why we're so thrilled to be able to fund such a variety of community needs nationwide. So as I mentioned earlier, our 25 selections for the Swiffer grants for communities were made in September, totaling almost $73 million. Award amounts were between $500,000 and $4 million, though most were closer to that $4 million figure. And these entities include local governments, cities, townships, villages, parishes, districts. These are sort of the general types of government units that you'll see that comprise political institutions. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see a map that shows the 25 selectees for this funding opportunity. You can see we have a wide range of geographic diversity across the country. I believe it's 23 states and Puerto Rico as well. Alaska, Hawaii, west of the Mississippi, east of the Mississippi, north and south. It was very important to us to spread the money around as equitably as we could. And we're very pleased to show that the maps are showing that our investments are really making it to many corners of the country. In addition, on this slide, you can see sort of the technical focus project types that were selected within each of our 25 selections. I'll start in the top right. 16% or 4 out of 25 went towards equipment and structures for improving material recovery facilities, or MRFs. We had one grant that supported anaerobic digestion for creating natural gas out of food and organics waste. 4% or one grant towards processing construction and demolition debris. 3 grants towards reuse infrastructure. 32% of our grants towards composting. Again, what I mentioned earlier was that we saw a lot of interest in composting in communities around the country, and that's really reflected in the other grants that we selected. 60% towards drop-off and transfer stations. And 16% as well for curbside access. So meeting the residents of each community where they are to collect that recycling and food waste at their curb. Next slide, please. So I understand there will be some presentations from some applicants that were selected for funding. I wanted to highlight a few other awards that a few other selections that were being made towards cities, understanding that this is the mayor's council. So the first being the city of Providence, Rhode Island. This was a selection for $3.35 million to expand food waste diversion in businesses, institutions, and households. It also expands municipal recycling collection across the city. Next slide, please. We had a $4 million selection towards Trujillo Alto in Puerto Rico. This would provide recycling services for areas of Trujillo Alto that do not currently have access, and also provide recycling to 36,000 residents of this municipality for the first time, which we're very excited about. Next slide. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, This applicant was selected for $4 million to redevelop the city's North Transfer Station, which provides a location for self-haul resource recovery within the city. In New Orleans, Louisiana, the city was selected for nearly $4 million to expand residential curbside access for 73,000 households. It also will support the city's waste management by developing a solid waste master plan over the next 10 years. And in Bozeman, Montana, this applicant was selected for $4 million to provide single and multifamily homes in Bozeman with the access to curbside composting for both organics and including food waste as well. I understand I went through that list very quickly. I do want to say that all of these applicants and many more, all 25 of our selections are highlighted on EPA's website. Each one has its own fact sheet, which just gives sort of top level information about each applicant and the selections. So I would encourage you to go to our website, which I can put in the chat for more in-depth information about each of our selections. So with that, I'm happy to field any questions.
Yeah, Dan, thank you so much for sharing all of this guidance with us today. So thank you. Also want to thank all of our participants. As Jamie noted in the chat, we have a great group of local government leaders of all sizes from all across the country. So take a look at that chat for that. Also, this is our Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat and we'll try to get to as many as we can. And then finally, we will also be posting in the chat a new document on 5 creative ways that you can use recycling grants to support sustainable waste management practices. So all of that in the chat. We have already started receiving some questions. So Dan, I'll throw them your way, and if you can try to get to as many of these as quickly as possible, we'll keep it going. So Amy Connolly from Zionsville, Indiana, has asked, what data needs to be tracked to apply for this grant? Dan?
Data tracked to apply for the grant, meaning what metrics would already need to be in place in order to apply for the grant?
What data before submitting a grant, during the grant cycle, maybe even after the grant cycle?
Yeah, so as far as data before awarding the grant, we don't have any specific requirements for exactly what would need to be reported on to be selected. We did have 6 mandatory outputs and outcomes that if selected, grantees will need to report on. And these are varied. They range from the number of infrastructure investments created to greenhouse gas emissions reduced to tons of MSW recycled, collected, composted, or managed. These are all related. If selected for an award, these would all be mandatory reporting requirements that would be reported on throughout the life cycle of the grant, which is 3 years.
Great. Okay, thank you. Stacy Hetzman from the city of Phoenix has asked, what is the most important consideration in a successful grant application?
I don't know that there's one most important consideration. We really do take a holistic approach to evaluating all aspects of grant applications, everything from how thoroughly the grantee answered all of the evaluation criteria in their application, to how thorough their responses are, to how detailed, to if it left open-ended questions to some of our reviewers. We also take a really strong look at the budget and any other associated documentation that may be submitted along with the application. So I don't know that there's any one individual. However, for anyone applying in either in the future or really to any grant program of technical focus, I strongly recommend you read the request for applications as thoroughly as possible and respond to everything that you can within the page limit provided during your application.
Great. We have a question from Britton Burnett from the city of Grandview. And that question is, can these grants be used for public-private partnerships? So
the recycling education and outreach grant program, not the one that I highlighted, but one of our sister programs, a public-private partnership can apply for funding under that one. However, for the Swiffer grants for communities, it's restricted to units of local government.
Great. And two other quick questions. When will the next application cycle be open?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is the question of the hour from a lot of different stakeholders around the country. I don't have any information on that quite yet. We'll definitely advertise it as widely as we possibly can when we do know more information. There's also a link on our website to stay connected and sign up for email updates, and we can share that link in the chat. When we do have more information on future rounds of funding, we'll share it certainly through that avenue as well.
That's great, Dan. Thank you so much. And all of you can be assured that as soon as that information is out, it'll also be on our local infrastructure hub website as well. So thank you so much, Dan, for being with us today. I'm now pleased to introduce our next speaker, Judy Sheehan. She's the Director of Municipal Waste Management Association at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And so Judy will moderate our next panel of mayors and their teams. So Judy, take it away. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. For those of you who might not know, the U.S. Conference of Mayors has an environmental affiliate called the Municipal Waste Management Association, or MWMA, which focuses on solid waste recycling and sustainability issues facing cities. And you can find more information about our organization on our website. And just as a reminder for our audience, we will have time at the end of our next panel to answer some of your questions. So please feel free to keep them coming and write them in the chat box, and we'll try to answer them as many as we can. As Daniel mentioned it in the beginning, the area of solid waste and recycling, as we all know, does not usually get a lot of federal resources. So we're very pleased of this investment into recycling. And we're also very hopeful and crossing fingers that this funding will be continued in the near future. But I'm sure a lot of you are curious as to the type of projects who won these awards. And so we're very pleased that we have three staff people whose communities are the proud recipients of EPA Swiffer grants worth, I think, $4 million each for their cities, which is amazing. So today we have with us Faith Leach, Chief Administrator Officer for the City of Baltimore, Maryland. Katie Kennedy, Construction and Demolition Waste Diversion Lead for Seattle Public Utilities. And Jason McCombs, Strategic Initiatives Division Manager for the City of Austin, Texas. I want to thank you all for coming and joining us and sharing your expertise with us. And hopefully our audience will get a little bit of an insight into what makes a winning application. So I'm going to start off by asking each of you to just give a brief overview of your Swiffer Recycling Grant project. And also, how did you determine that this particular project was the right one for your community? Faith, would you mind leading us off?
Absolutely, absolutely. Hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Faith Leach, and I serve as the Chief Administrative Officer here in the City of Baltimore. Since today is about best practices, I actually think it's helpful for me to share a little bit of background about how the City of Baltimore is approaching IIJA funding from a broader perspective, and then kind of talk a little bit more about this particular grant. So almost about 2 years ago, Mayor Scott established an Office of Infrastructure Development, and he charged this new office and this new entity with pursuing and maximizing our city's access to this once-in-a-generation funding made available through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. So to date, we've actually been awarded more than about $100 million in IIJA funding, including this $4 million grant under the Swiffer program, which is to fund the development of a solar-powered, scalable composting facility right here in the City of Baltimore. So with this particular project, we decided that we wanted to co-locate the project with our East Side transfer station, which is located on Bowley's Lane in East Baltimore. In recent years in Baltimore, much like our cities across the country, we've been seeing a lot of momentum when it comes to urban composting. But yet we still know that we don't have a lot of capacity in our current infrastructure, and we need more local food scrap recycling capacity if we really want to meaningfully reduce the city's waste, create more affordable composting, and address overall environmental issues here in the city of Baltimore. So for us, when it was time to decide what we would pursue, this idea of a solar-powered scalable composting facility was the first thing that came to mind, so that we could really expand our overall composting capacity here in the city of Baltimore. The other important thing about this particular grant is that we had already set aside some funds around our East Side transfer station. And so by co-locating this project, we would really be able to kind of maximize and braid together some funding sources to create this really cool and innovative facility right here in the city of Baltimore. So in October, we were notified that we had been approved for the full $4 million. The total cost of the project is about $5 million. So as you can imagine, we were very excited that we were able to get this award. So again, for us, it was really about adding that additional capacity for composting in the city of Baltimore, and really expanding the urban composting capacity that we have to support more of our residents really being able to get involved. And so we were very grateful and excited that we were awarded this opportunity through the Swiffer Grant and EPA.
That sounds excellent. Thank you. I used to joke with the mayors, it's like solid waste and recycling won't get you elected, but it will get you unelected if you don't do it right.
Absolutely.
So Katie, would you mind going next?
I don't mind. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm Katie Kennedy. I actually work for Seattle Public Utilities in the Solid Waste Division, and as you mentioned, my focus is construction and demolition waste. So the grant that we applied for and received from EPA is to establish a salvage lumber warehouse. So let's see. Everybody knows what compost is, I think, but how do I explain this in a hurry? At Seattle Public Utilities, we're moving upstream from recycling to waste prevention. And in terms of waste prevention and construction activities, that means reuse. And a great thing to reuse in the construction industry is wood. I talk to people a lot about how our old growth forests in the Pacific Northwest, 70% of the original old growth forest is gone. A lot of that is tied up in our houses. So when we take down all these houses now, which tend to be, right now we take down houses that tend to be built between 1900 and 1940, this is the time to reharvest our old growth lumber. And so I want to definitely make sure that people take away that this is a reuse project. It's infrastructure for reuse, which I'm so excited that EPA included reuse, even though it's called Swiffer. So for recycling, this is a reuse project. And this is a great role, I think, for the government sector, because it is really hard to establish reuse infrastructure. There's higher profits in recycling. Maybe there's higher profits in compost. There's not super high profits in reusing lumber. So it is super hard to establish infrastructure in an urban area for that purpose. And it makes sense to establish it here because we have all this construction activity here, and we don't want people driving 60 miles outside of the city to get their lumber, like to take it there, mill it, process it, blah, 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 and then bring it back for construction activities. So we really need these this infrastructure in the city, and that's the story I told with our grant. So with our application. So I think those are the key parts.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason, I think you're also in the field of reuse right now. So Jason, would you mind telling the audience what you
Sure.
guys got award?
So my name's Jason McCombs with the City of Austin. I work for Austin Resource Recovery, which is a solid waste services department here. Strategic Initiatives Division Manager. And yeah, we received a grant for a reuse warehouse. Ours is really focused on receiving furniture though, and then providing job skills. We're helping to partner with nonprofits on workforce development. We can repair furniture and then redistribute that, hopefully helping people transitioning from being unhoused into, homes and stuff like that. So that's what the overall idea is. And kind of piggybacking off what Katie said before, I think, you know, a lot of times we're talking about salvage and reuse. A lot of times the common denominator just comes out to space and warehouse and kind of infrastructure, and you need the space to hold the material until you can find a higher, better use for it than a landfill. And so that's kind of the root of it. But the history kind of for our program here in Austin is, for years, we've partnered with the University of Texas on a program we call Move Out ATX. And since 2017, we've worked with them. And there's this neighborhood right all around kind of UT that has about 18,000 renters called West Campus. It's a very dense area. And you can imagine every summer, all the students would move out and there would be a significant amount of furniture, you know, everything from, you know, from their house, their apartment or whatever to be left at the curb. So what we started doing, we started a program called Move Out ATX. We would partner with local nonprofits, Goodwill, Salvation Army, et cetera, and set up stations all over this neighborhood to be able to help divert this material so students could bring it there instead of just leaving it at the curb. And what we started finding over these last few years is that, especially with furniture, which is such a large bulky material, that you know, nonprofits, one, could only take so much of it, and then two, they had to be kind of selective about what they took. Furniture takes up a lot of space, you know, on the floor of the Goodwill, for example, and sometimes it's part of the move over time. So they were very selective about it. So we started an offshoot program that we called Free Furniture Market. We would let the nonprofits take the furniture, but then we would move everything else to this one location, and we advertised, and we basically gave the furniture away. And we saw huge interest. You know, last year, we basically opened a 3-day, Friday through Saturday. We had over 800 visitors. We moved over 500 pieces of furniture, about 22 tons of material. This was one little small sample size. So it really identified this kind of gap in the reuse market. All that material would have gone into the landfill. All that furniture was going to go straight into the landfill. So, because, you know, without the nonprofit, they would take it. And so, like I said, we identified this gap and this need, and we also saw an opportunity to help support some of, you know, homeless initiatives here in the community as well. And so, yeah, so I think we're really excited about it. This grant will help us really just help purchase real estate here within by that warehouse space. And the city will then be supporting, you know, staff and working with the
Sounds excellent. Thank you. I mean, I think we can all relate to furniture being thrown out and just how tragic that is, where it just fills up the landfills, and how many people would need nicely or gently used furniture for their own purposes. So that's fantastic. These all sound really, really, really amazing projects. I'm not sure all of you can relate to this, but given the fact that EPA has such a focus on environmental justice and EJ40 and trying to get a lot of resources into neighborhoods that have been negatively impacted in the past, do any of these projects have that as part of your application process? Does your project advance at all Justice 40 goals or provide services to underserved neighborhoods in your community? I just want to open it up. Does anyone, does your project do that? Faith, you've nodded your head.
I'm happy to talk a little bit about the role that equity played in our application process. So many of the historically disadvantaged communities in the city of Baltimore are also adjacent to industrial activity. So some of our communities, when you really look at some of the statistics, they're in the 99th percentile when it comes to asthma, for example, or the 97th percentile for low income, or 96th percentile when it comes to proximity to hazardous waste. So the incinerator and the landfill are located adjacent to such communities. So we have a lot of that are located in these historically disadvantaged Black or communities of color. And so really under the mayor's leadership, we decided that we would focus on ensuring equity throughout the city of Baltimore. And so when it came to this particular project, which is located in East Baltimore near, you know, one of those such communities, we really wanted to prioritize equity and environmental justice. And so by focusing on reuse through composting, we have the potential to eliminate up to about 40% of waste that previously was being incinerated or that was entering into our landfills, which we know will help reduce greenhouse emissions and other toxic pollutants that are disproportionately impacting communities of colors color where these incineration facilities are located. So again, for us, by shifting to composting, we are going to be directly really addressing some of those environmental justice challenges that have been faced by communities of color in the city of Baltimore.
Faith, that's excellent. Katie or Jason? Katie.
I would say we didn't, I forgot to mention a key part of ours is that someone asked about public-private partnerships earlier, and ours are, we wrote our application to, and we're awarded the funding to, we're basically seeding a private sector solution. So we will put out an RFP after we receive that, after we get our agreement signed. We will put out an RFP. We'll look for a vendor to set up and operate this salvage lumber warehouse. I'm hoping that that is the best way to get the right organization with the proper expertise to run it and make it most likely to be successful and sustainable going beyond the 3-year grant period. And then we didn't have a location because of that. And so we didn't try, and I can't remember. I think you had to opt in and say this fits the Justice 40 criteria or something. So we didn't try and do that. And so, but the equity elements that
Katie, can't hear you.
Oh, really? I don't know if I can.
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'll just keep going then. Okay. Okay, great.
Oh,
so
there we go.
You can't though, Judy. Okay, I'm sorry. And some other people can. Okay, great. The equity elements that I mentioned in our grant application were workforce development and creating jobs and providing affordable building materials to the community. And also there's a public health impact of doing deconstruction, which is how you get the wood out of old homes. So doing deconstruction instead of demolition. So you're reducing like the lead and the asbestos and dust being distributed throughout the neighborhoods.
Excellent.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Technology, you gotta love the glitches. So, Jason, how about you?
Sure. Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, much of it was focused on, so helping supporting the unhoused community as well. But we do have a workforce development component that we are hoping as well to tie into that. We're actually searching for like a partner right now to help work on that. But hopefully we'll achieve repair and on-site skills so we can, train at this warehouse as well. So.
Excellent. EPA is big into data. Were you able to use data to make the case for the funding, i.e. the types of jobs that would be created, the landfill waste diverted, greenhouse gas emissions reduced, benefits to Justice 40 or disadvantaged communities? Were you able to plot some of the data or what you're anticipating in your application? Faith, you're nodding your head again, so you're back to you.
Absolutely. That's a really good question. So we are very much a data-driven city. And so data was a huge part of our application. I already shared some of the health outcomes that some of our communities are impacted by. And then I also talked a little bit previously about how 40%, we believe that about 40% of our waste is compostable. Well, back in about, I think 2020, we did a study which determined about 10% of total emissions were waste related in the city. And so when we dug a little bit deeper and we were filling out this application, we determined that, we believe this project will divert about 12,000 tons of organic materials from entering into the landfill and into incineration streams. And that in turn will help eliminate about 6,000 tons of greenhouse emissions. So we were very thoughtful about looking at what types of data and trying to project the overall impact that this project could potentially have on the city of Baltimore if we were awarded these funds. And we did make that very clear in our application.
Katie or Jason?
Sure, I can go real quick. Yeah, I think, I talked a little bit too about our move out ATX. We kind of had these we had a smaller scale, but we had a good, I think, model. I think that we could, demonstrate this gap that I think I mentioned before. And so we used a lot of that data, but then also I think spoke a lot too about, how the ability to kind of purchase real estate and build this infrastructure, all these other doors and partnerships that can then open, I think, down the line, not just furniture, but very similar to what Katie's talking about with CND and deconstruction material as well, as there's kind of the scalable growth that this could help support.
Katie?
Yeah, we talked about tons diverted to reuse. It doesn't necessarily mean from the landfill, because the wood is mostly burned for fuel, which also has a greenhouse gas impact. So it's diverted to reuse, I would say. And yeah, so mostly that, but I just want to mention also consumption-based emissions inventories. Like Seattle did a consumption-based emissions inventory, and the consumption-based emissions inventories just show like how much of a bigger footprint we have when we consider all of our purchases and consumption in the city. So you're looking at your greenhouse gas impacts beyond your borders, and we tend to basically like we tend to rely more on manufacturing and resource extraction beyond our borders, like cities do, right? So when you consider those bigger impacts, it points you more towards we need to reuse, like we need to reuse the materials that we have. So yes, greenhouse gas impacts in tons is the short answer for me. But
And I'm sorry, I didn't submit this question to you before, but I just need to ask, are you guys going to face any problems with placing these facilities in the neighborhoods? Any NIMBYism, or do you think people are going to be welcoming these additions to their neighborhoods? Because I mean, I know that's one of the toughest things when you're talking about solid waste and reuse and recycling. And I mean, Jason, I was wanting to know about bed bugs for your situation, but do you have sites already picked out? And is
Yeah, we don't have a site picked out, I think, because, once we get the funding approved, with the EPA, we are able to move forward, we're really going to kickstart here over the next 6 months, locating where it could be. It's been a little bit of a moving target because, obviously we're trying to purchase real estate here, within the city limits. And so we don't have an exact site pulled out. I think it's always something that, we consider, but, we definitely are going to be doing, public outreach, working with community engagement, and, we will definitely be, committed to creating a good neighbor. I think that's what we do with our facilities, and we continue to do that. So.
Faith?
Yep. So as I mentioned, so this particular, the composting facility is actually going to be co-located with one of our transfer stations. And so, as I mentioned, this will be a good thing for this community, because we're actually going to be able to reduce some of the incineration that occurs. So I think, we don't anticipate that we'll be receiving much pushback. And we've already identified a location because it's going to be co-located.
Wonderful. Katie?
anticipate much. There's truck traffic, but there's not air pollution or smells or whatnot. So I don't think so.
Yeah, you're gonna be safer, I think, with the wood versus composting or furniture or something like that. I mean, actually, furniture is not composting.
Furniture should be okay.
Yeah, furniture should be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
But are you guys combining any of this funding with other grant funding, or I mean, there's been so much money now provided with IIJA and IRA. It almost feels like you're drinking from a fire hose. And so the problem is, as grant writers, is like, how do I piece all this together? Are you trying to do that at all, or is this funding going to be sufficient to make this vision a reality?
So for us, we not necessarily federal funding, some funding from the state. So the total project is about $5 million, and this grant is $4 million. We have, though, used some of our American Rescue Plan Act funding to upgrade some of our public works facilities and some of our landfills. So while that's not directly tied to this project, we are kind of braiding different funding sources that we have to really make some improvement to our public works facilities.
We're using $1 million of state funding.
Very cool. Jason?
And no, this is pretty standalone for this project, and we will be supplementing with some of our budgeted funds as well for potential staff or equipment, things like that.
Okay. Excellent. I guess, I mean, you're all talking about how this is finding a key component, but and I think all three of you guys have some very, very strong um, planning grants for climate and greenhouse gas emission reductions, et cetera. But is this project supporting a larger project or outcome for your community? For example, this might be a little of a stretch, addressing homelessness or developing more green infrastructure or supporting a strong workforce development. Is that at all been added on to this grant, or can you see the ancillary benefits that this is going to be supportive of?
Yeah, I think for us, it kind of, as I mentioned before, it was, you know, a lot of times having this infrastructure, the warehouse in place was a bit of a kind of a linchpin and a barrier because of the high, you know, initial, you know, cost to buy real estate here in Austin and build. And so, yeah, I think for us, tying it into our homelessness initiative, but also, you know, reuse, it ties into our zero waste goals and our zero waste comprehensive plan as well. And so we are, like I said, we tried to tie it into multiple things. We've got a Austin Civilian Conservation Corps that we're looking at potentially working with as well from workforce development or help support this. And so we are trying to kind of help support this in many ways, and hopefully it can, like I said, grow too as well. We try to keep a broad, well, furniture is our initial you know, goal. You know, our hope is that we can continue to grow this program and it can, you know, scale into broader things. Seeing you know, salvageable construction debris, you know, as a long-term goal that we have as well. So
Yeah, very cool. Faith or Katie?
Sure. So this project is tied to a couple of the city's goals. So one is tied to our city's Less Waste, Better Baltimore solid waste operational plan that we put out as a city. Also, our Department of Planning, through our Department of Planning, we have our zero waste plan as well as our climate action plan. And then we also recently adopted a 10-year solid waste management plan, which this is directly tied to our solid waste management plan. And we do have this ultimate zero waste goal of diverting about 90% of organics from our waste stream. So this will help us meet that goal as well.
Excellent.
Similar for Seattle.
Are you aware of the bigger Seattle picture? I'm sure you are.
I'm aware. I think I'm aware. Yeah, it also fits in with our solid waste management plan and our climate goals and whatnot. Not a direct link um, to some of the big ails that the city is facing right now, necessarily. But I like to think about it as like, what kind of city do we want to live in? Like, we want a city where you can do reuse, and we value like the heritage that the lovely natural setting that we are in, and the wood that's come from that. And so it's a way of, it fits in with some bigger goals, I think.
Okay, actually I have a follow-up. I mean, reuse is so important. And I mean, Seattle has it's amazing the mindset that your residents have when it comes to recycling. And I have some very fun stories about being at a bar and seeing people separate their green glass from brown glass while they were drunk and drinking beers. And so that was just absolutely amazing. But it actually amazed, I won't even say the former mayor. But I just had a question. Are you guys using other levers to encourage reuse when it's often seen as more expensive or burdensome than buying new?
Are we using other levers? Yeah, I think I can answer that. Like, we have a deconstruction incentive going right now that I hope we will do until we require deconstruction. So, and I'm looking at ways to make it more, to make it easier for developers to do deconstruction, like we're doing, expedited electrical disconnects. I'm looking for permitting incentives that don't cost the city much, or don't cost the city anything, and make it more palatable. And I would say that, yeah, we have a super strong ethic here for doing the right thing by the environment. And we have really, really good infrastructure for building material resale, and people love it. And like the demand is sort of off the charts. Whatever they can get, they can sell. Our 3 local salvage material resellers, but on the wood side, it's harder. It's harder to because there's so much like labor involved in making it reusable, making the lumber reusable. So that's where the grant comes in and where the city comes in on making that reuse market palatable and sustainable.
Fantastic. And you guys are off the hot seat. I just want to sincerely thank you all. Oh, wait, Katie, you had another thing? Okay.
I don't know. I have some advice
Advice
on.
is good. Come on.
Is that okay? Okay,
Yeah.
and I would ask I would ask Faith and Jason if you have any too to people that are applying. But I got feedback on our application. It came down to when we got this, I thought, oh, they loved our approach. And but not exactly. Like EPA did like our approach, but I think it came down to points. Like we every time they asked there's a lot of redundancy, right? Like there's a lot of questions that you could provide the same answer or similar answers on, and you have to do that, even though it feels redundant. Like you can't trust that a reviewer will be looking towards another section or at another section where you've already answered this question. You have to assume that the reviewer has no memory for other questions, or that it's like split up. Maybe it's multiple reviewers, but you have to assume that like each question stands on its own. So I happen to know that, it's more about points than about like you have a really great idea.
Yeah. Jason, Faith, do you have some advice to others? Actually, there's a question related to it. Well, actually, answer that first, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know the exact answer, but I do think, just in meeting with the EPA staff, I think that we were very direct and simple, and that demonstrating that, with this one kind of chunk of money, we could do this one thing, which is buy real estate, and it would open door A, B, C, and D. We could very clearly show that path, and so there wasn't money tied to a whole lot of different kind of smaller initiatives in it. It was really, if this one thing could be funded, all these other things could happen. And I'd say that might be my recommendation.
Okay. Faith?
Yeah, I think, I think our focus was really on a big piece of this was on the equity component. And another piece of this is one, we were leveraging state funding and co-locating a facility, and just the overall environmental impact to an area that had disproportionately been impacted by incineration and greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. And so that's where we really focused, and we tried to use data to really paint the picture of the impact of us bringing composting to this particular neighborhood.
Thank you. I'm good. Okay, since I'm moderating, I can ask one more question that's coming from the audience, and it's having to do with staffing and grant management, and how grant management and what that looks like for you. I mean, do you have someone dedicated to managing this grant? Is it a team's approach? I mean, have you seen that affect other planned efforts because now you're getting money in here? Is there, I guess it's more of a resource staffing issue. Do you have, you'll never have enough staff, but how is this going to be impacting you all?
Yeah, so we have about 4 to 5 staff that are going to be directly tied to the implementation of this grant. But in addition, as I mentioned at the top of the call, we actually have an entire office of about 10 staff that are pursuing all IIJA funding. If folks know anything about the city of Baltimore, we're a really old city. Our infrastructure is very old. And so we just want to maximize all the money that we can get. And so we're actually leveraging some of the project management support that we have from this central infrastructure office, along with the staff that we have in our public works department that will be implementing the grant. And we are using a portion of the grant to fund about 4 or 5 staff.
Jason, Katie?
Real quick. So yeah, we've got one of our teams is a circular economy team here within Austin Resource Recovery, and they're really focused on economic development in finding in markets, and they're partnered with our economic development, a broader economic development department here with the city of Austin. And so we've got a team here of about 5 working on that. They helped write this grant, that team and me working together. And then we awarded it, and we did have a little bit of a like, okay, now what? We got to figure out what to do here. So right now we are allocating their time to kind of project management through this kind of early phase with the EPA, but we are working on potentially adding new positions and positions focused that will actually be, at the warehouse. We'll be housing it eventually under our kind of diversion facilities group, which is like our HHW group. But hopefully we'll be bringing on new staff there in the next couple of years.
Very good. Katie, any parting words regarding staffing?
I would say less. I'm hoping there's less of an impact on us since we're contracting for the warehouse. But there's 2 of us that work on this at the city.
Okay. Well, I want to sincerely thank you all for joining us today, sharing your expertise, and we look forward to watching how all these projects progress in the future. And I think I hand it back now to Mr. Medina. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Judy and panelists, thank you so much. I think we all learned a lot from that last 20 minutes or so of conversation. And now we'd like to learn from everybody, all 100 plus of us on today's session. We're going to send you all a quick Zoom poll. So please complete that while we're wrapping up. And please also note that our next session is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're hosting a tech and innovation session about zero emission buses and bus facilities. And we'll be focusing on how cities are using federal infrastructure funding to deploy new charging technologies in depots and along bus routes, and also to improve the resilience of transit systems' electric power supplies. You can register through the link in the chat. So before you leave us today, please complete the poll and take a look at tomorrow's session. And if you're available, please RSVP through the link. And we hope you enjoyed today's session and learned as much as we all did. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.